So when you use a plywood back, it's going to be honkier sounding because it's going to resonate at a particular frequency that the speakers are going to accentuate.
Okay.
You can tap on it with your knuckles on the back and you hear the bonk.
Yeah. Okay.
That bonk is going to be part of the sound. When you tap on the back of our cabins with your knuckle, you hear a thud. If you look at old Marshall cabs, you'll see very early ones that have plywood backs, and then the one that has the classic Marshall sound is an MDF back.
Okay.
And people will think that, they went to MDF to save money. Well, they might have,
but
that may have been the decision. It just turned out
to be a sonically good move. Welcome back to Los Angeles, boys and girls. As you can see, I have returned to the Fryette workshop. And yes, that means we're hopefully going to have a very nerdy and long discussion about guitar gear. As you might remember, last year we talked about guitar amps, and today I want to talk about guitar cabinets. Thanks for having me, Mr. Fryette.
Nice to see you again.
Here I am.
In fact, I was thinking about you.
Nice.
They played a Curtis Mayfield song on the radio called Don't Worry. And I thought, this is going to be perfect. I'm going to have to tell you about this.
Okay.
Because the full title of the song is Don't Worry, If There's a Hell Below, We're All Going to Go.
You'll understand this by the end of this video when I say goodbye to you. You'll get it. Yeah, right. That surprised you last time, right? But you liked it.
Yeah, it stuck with me. And I thought, I'm going to embellish it this time.
Thank you. As you guys have seen, I've already shown the Fryette cabinets a few times on my channel, and I want to learn more about the construction of cabinets. So one question coming from you, and that's a big one, is what's important when you design a cabinet? What makes it sound great? Which are the important parameters? Material, size, wood joints, you name it.
Oh, well.
That takes a while, right? Yeah.
Takes a while because first you have to decide what you're designing the cabinet to do. Do you want it to be resonant? Do you want it to have a wide projection? Do you want it to be focused and tight? Do you want it to be loose and, malleable? All those kind of things. Surprisingly, a lot of those have nothing to do with the materials. Mm-hmm. They have to do with the space that the speaker resides in. Mm-hmm. Inside the cabinet is a space. It's referred to as an air column.
Yeah.
And that air column is probably the most important consideration.
The question, like how much air there is?
Not only how much air there is, but how compact the column is. Mm-hmm. So when the speaker is moving in the cabinet, if a cabinet is really tightly sealed, that column of air acts like a shock absorber.
Yeah.
It's stiffer, and it will hold the speaker dispersion into a tighter range, a shorter range.
It will move less.
It'll move less. Yeah. Interestingly, that restriction increases the power handling capacity of the speaker. Because the speaker isn't moving as much, it's not generating as much heat. And the magnet is acting like a heat sink, absorbing the heat that it does produce. So as long as the speaker isn't moving really wildly, it won't deform. Like, for example, the voice coil. If the voice coil is a softer material, when the cone and the suspension get pushed to its limit, the voice coil can deform a little bit. And with additional heat, it'll deform more.
Okay.
So there's all these kind of dynamics going on in a speaker before you even talk about the wood or the joints or the materials.
But staying there, like the tighter you seal, or the more you seal a cabinet,
the more power you can throw at it.
The more power, but also like, doesn't it get like more powerful in the bass as well?
It stays out of its own way. In other words, it will reproduce the note that you played more quickly, and then return to its state of rest for the next note to play. So they won't overlap as much.
More accurate,
and more separation between the notes.
Right. Because what I've learned is that the more, like for me as a metal player, the better sealed the cab is, the better the low end sound. That's a matter of taste, I guess.
Right.
But compared to old Marshalls or other cabs where that are not sealed properly.
Right. So you're in a car and you've got a stiff suspension, tight, and the air in the tires is, the pressure is high, the air pressure in the tires is high, and the tires are getting hot because you're driving on it.
Yeah.
So when you're on a rough road, you feel every rock and every dip in the road.
Sure.
If the suspension is softer and there's less pressure in the tires and you're driving on the same road, it feels smoother, but also the car is flexing more, and you feel like the whole car is less in control because everything else is sort of moving around, not rigidly held to a certain parameter. Same thing in speakers. So the whole evolution of our cabinet design happened when I was learning how a cabinet behaved, how to make a cabinet work a certain way, and how to pick a speaker, and then how to not like that speaker, and then how to go to a manufacturer and describe to them what you're hearing and what you want it to do differently. And then they'll come back to you and go, well, we can do this, but then you'll get this. What do you want to do about that? If you change a parameter, you'll get another characteristic, and then you have to deal with that. And then do you want that there? Do we need to eliminate that? And of course, if we eliminate that, then something else
happens.
Right. And so it's a big process where you basically start off with an idea and then you negotiate until you finally go, yeah, I think we've got the bulk of the work done. And then after that, that's where the joints and the wood and the construction, that's where that starts to get refined. After all you got it into a shape, you got it into a box, you got the speakers in here, you got it sort of generally where you want it. And then after that, then you start talking about the wood and what it's doing and how thick it needs to be.
So what is it doing? Like wood, both thickness and the material.
The biggest thing is material, and most of the best 412 cabinets or 212 cabinets, most of the best cabinets that you run across are made with Baltic birch. And the reason they're made with Baltic birch is because every layer of the ply is Baltic birch and the same thickness as the outer two layers. 13 ply or 12 ply or 18 ply, whatever it is, each layer is the same thickness. Then there are grades. There are sheets within the plywood that maybe had a knot hole in it, and they knocked out the knot hole, and that creates a void. So when you hear the term void-free plywood, that's layers inside the plywood that have the knot holes knocked out, and there's a little space in there where that knot used to be. That's the void. If you have a lot of voids in there, that changes the character of the wood a little bit, but mostly what it does, it's just a place for junk to accumulate when when the wood is being manufactured. It could be a piece of a nail. It could be, a bug egg or some spare plywood or something that will make a noise in there. If you ever had a guitar that had that some little buzz that you can't find it anywhere, it turns out to be a loose spring under the pickup or some stupid thing like that, but you can hear it, and after a while it becomes so annoying that you can't stand it anymore. That's the kind of thing that happens in voids. And you can specify different grades where there's fewer and fewer, and then no voids, void-free. And, of course, the cost
Which means you need to select more.
That's
right. Throw away more, and it gets more expensive.
Now, by comparison, when we first started making cabinets, we had a cabinet guy that we selected to use and gave him all the specifications and make it like this and be sure to use.
So that was in the VHD days, long ago?
So, okay, I get it. He makes a prototype, and we get it, and we listen to another prototype that we had made before by another guy who was just a small cabinet maker, and they sound entirely different.
Wow.
Okay, go back to him. Everything looks okay. We're taking the cabinet apart to see what's different, and it looks okay, but it sounds entirely different. You did use the Baltic birch that we specified, right? He goes, well, I used birch. What do you mean it's got birch? Well, this is actually called applewood. And, well, okay, what is applewood? Applewood is furniture material. It's a nice piece of birch on one side and a nice piece of birch on the other side, and between floor sweepings and garbage all the way through the rest of it.
And that made the difference.
Entirely different thing.
Wow.
You have basically, you're kind of on your own, and you have to learn those things and learn the tricks. I talked to Reinhold Wagner about this one time, and he had a very similar experience where the cabinet guy that he used bought some lower grade plywood to build an order of his calves because he was in a hurry and the good stuff wasn't available. So he just went with whatever he had. And Reinhold told me that he was like walking through his shop and he heard a 412 cab and he did the same thing. What the hell's going on over here with this? Heard it immediately, and you would. So with our cab suppliers, we have this, just, you don't change anything. We're going to find it. Don't even try it. We'll hear it. We'll see it. We'll find it. I guarantee you're going to be taking it back. Don't even put us through that. And you know what? Every 3 months, we find something. As far as the joints are concerned,
that's
the tongue and groove thing is cosmetically nice.
Yeah.
And people put a lot of stock and faith in that, like it's just the superior way to do things. And it's just like everything. At one point in time, it was the superior way to do things. Adhesives weren't as good when tongue and groove joints were created. They were supposed to make a stronger bond because the glue itself wasn't that hot. So you needed something that wouldn't come apart. These days, adhesives are ridiculous. I mean, the rear view mirror on the windshield of your car is glued onto the glass, and you get in a rear end or a 4-car crash.
This thing is still there.
The top of the car is smashed, the sides of the car is smashed, but the rear view mirror is still sitting there on the glass.
Okay.
So
it's less important these days?
It is less important. And also when you use CNC manufacturing, which we do, that keeps everything consistent. That keeps all the parts the same. So when you have a dado, which is a different kind of a joint than a tongue and groove, it's a slot into which one piece sits on another piece, and then you put the adhesive on, and then some guys use nails. They use a nail gun, bang, 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 to press the pieces together until the glue cures, right? And I say cure rather than dry because it's chemically designed to solidify on the inside. Drying implies that it's drying from the outside, and it's going to take a while for the glue on the inside to dry. Cure means that it's all going to dry at the same time, regardless of where it is in the surface or on the inside.
Understand. Yeah.
So that curing process is really important because that determines how quickly you can ship the cabinet after it's built. And we've experienced that too, where we got the cabinets, we loaded the speakers, they go through QC, they go in the box, they get to some place, and it all came apart.
Really?
The customer got a box with 6 pieces of wood in it, and one piece had 4 speakers bolted to it. So all of our dado joints, they may use pins to put things together, but there's also 3 holes on each end of the joint for a screw to go in, which helps make it more rigid.
Okay, so that's a combination. Okay.
Yeah, it's a combination.
And what about if we stay with like the construction? I just found out that you also make ported cabs. I know ported cabs from hi-fi or from studio
and
monitors.
That's a different terminology than vented cabs.
Vented cabs. So what does that do and why?
Well, a ported cab is designed. The idea is to extend the low frequency response of the system, the speaker in the cabinet. And it really came about from the effort to shrink the size of the cabinet down, get a bookshelf speaker. And it's going to be sitting on a shelf, so it's not going to resonate. It's not going to bounce off the floor. The low end is going to be anemic. So the porting concept was developed to extend the low frequency response of a smaller package. And also a stiffer wood. So some bookshelf speakers are made out of MDF, medium density fiberboard. Why do they use an expensive speaker cabinet? Why do they use that cheap wood? It's rigid, it's dense, and it doesn't contribute or contributes less resonance to the system than plywood would. And in an audio cabinet, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to make the cabinet inert, invisible to the sound. All you're trying to do is get the speaker to move in a place in a room and in such a way that it will move air the right way. That's the last thing you want in a guitar cabinet,
right.
unless you're making it just to make it cheap. And that's where MDF gets the reputation for being cheap, because it's in a system that's not designed to sit in a living room or in a recording studio in one spot forever and never move. A guitar speaker cabinet is designed to move and get thrown around. And in that environment, they fall apart.
Right.
Because they're getting hit, they're getting chipped, and they're much, much heavier. And these days, the shipping cost for a 412 cabinet is so high that
makes no sense.
It's not cost effective to make a cabinet with cheaper wood anymore, because the shipping cost of it
will compensate that.
Will compensate for that. Right. So you're actually better off using more expensive wood.
Okay, which is good in the end. Yeah.
Exactly.
But back to the concept of a guitar cab, which you want to have a sound. Right?
Now that we talked about a bookshelf with a port to do this specific
you want to
thing,
be invisible,
right?
And then
the port is usually on the front where you're going to hear it.
Yeah.
What venting does is it spreads out the dispersion of the speaker, it makes it more omnidirectional.
Yeah.
It makes it so it doesn't really necessarily hit you in the face, because on a vented cab, some of the energy of the speaker is going out the back.
And going back to the question from before, that also makes the speaker move more again, because
the speaker will move more. It will be easier to blow. The sound, the energy coming out of the back will be mostly low end content, but it'll reflect off the walls and give you this nice ambient sound.
So in the room, you get a more.
The drummer can hear. The drummer on stage in a band can hear a vented cab way better than can hear a sealed cab.
Okay.
So everybody the whole experience is more omnidirectional. The backs of the Sound City cabs and the Fryette cabs are MDF. Now, the reason they're MDF is because the sides and the baffle and the top and bottom are all Baltic birch, and they have this sort of resonant quality. But the back of the cabinet has the most unobstructed area of the entire cab.
Sure.
The baffle's got speakers, so they're making it more rigid. They're acting like braces.
Sides are smaller.
And then the sides are smaller, and that's where all the big joints are. The back is the single largest piece of the cabinet, and therefore has the biggest impact on the sound of the cab when you change it. So when you use a plywood back, again, depends on which kind of plywood you use, but just a Baltic birch cab with a plywood back, a Baltic birch back, is going to be honkier sounding, because it's going to resonate at a particular frequency that the speakers are going to accentuate.
Okay.
And so you're going to hear that. You can tap on it with your knuckles on the back and you hear the bonk.
Okay.
That bonk is going to be part of the sound. When you tap on the back of our cabins with your knuckle, you hear a thud. It reflects the sound off of the baffle back into the cab differently. It doesn't ring so much.
So you want the construction to be resonating a bit, but not too much, and that's why the back is MDF, which
that's right.
Okay,
that's right.
That combination is.
So if you look at old Marshall cabs, you'll see very early ones that have plywood backs, and then the one that has the classic Marshall sound is an MDF back.
Okay.
And people will think that, they went to MDF to save money. Well, they might have. But that may have been the decision. It just turned out
to be a sonically good move.
But then, by the same token, typical Marshall cabinets leak air all around the baffle and partly around the back. That's a softer, flubbier sound.
Looser,
in a cool way. But I mean, it does that.
Depends on what you want.
Where the Sound City cab, or like a Hiwatt cab, for example, that's vented on the back, will have a boomier characteristic, but because the rest of the cab is so well built, it won't be flubby, but it'll be big and bold there.
Got it.
And then, of course, the speakers will, the parts of the speaker, the cone, the suspension, the voice coil, those things will all flex more and change the character of the speaker as a result.
Let's talk about, that was another question from someone. Let's talk about straight versus slanted cabs.
Right. Well,
in general, more or less. So like, what happens if you do this?
Basically, what happens when you do this with the entire baffle is you just widen the dispersion characteristic. We don't have one right here. Our fat bottom straight cabinet, which actually has a tipped baffle. It's tipped to the same, I think, 14 degrees that the Marshall one is tipped at. Just mostly on cosmetics. I like the way it looked. And I think that a lot of those decisions that Marshall made were more cosmetic than
actually sonically.
Well, because at that time they were just like trying to build a product, just like we were when we started out. They're like, hey, well, this would look cool.
Rock and roll.
God knows what it's going to sound like, or if anybody's going to like it. We'll see. And that became, the standard, right? Because it was first. There wasn't necessarily a sonic objective in tipping that baffle. It was more just like that's what I thought people sort of expected, and I liked the way it looked myself. As you pointed out in the video that you did comparing front loaded and rear loaded, and you talked about that node.
Have the wavelengths of the depth of the cab.
Right. Yeah, that is a thing. But it isn't, I guarantee you, that's not a thing that anybody thought 2 minutes about when they were designing a cab. It's just like, well, that's the way it's done.
Right.
Consequently, when we decided to do the Deliverance cab, I was at the point where, okay, it's now time to screw the way it's been done. We're going to try some different things. Both of these cabs, the fat bottom cab has the sound post in it, but on both of these cabs, they have a V-brace in there. The purpose of that brace was to brace the baffle the way the baffle wants to be solid in the center. It doesn't, we don't want it to resonate too much.
Sure.
And then when you tie it to the back of the cab with this sound post, it puts the back and the baffle and the back cover in sync so that they're not beating against each other. The cabinet isn't breathing. Well, I wanted the cabinet to breathe because we had such a tight fit inside that we didn't have the air going in and out to make it like an accordion to make that happen. I wanted that resonance. I wanted that omnidirectional quality that the fat bottom doesn't have.
Right.
So why do I want that? Because I want to go in a club that holds 50 or 100 people and haul a 412 cabinet in for a good reason. I want to be able to hear it. The fat bottom in a small environment like that would just, you have to go stand out in the street in front of the club to hear it right. And the drummer absolutely can't hear it, So I just thought that would be a way for us to offer an option to what we do for the guys that don't want that really directional focus
so the
thing.
Deliverance, the idea behind it is to fill the room, to be more omni.
And the V-brace accomplished that because it separated the baffle from the back, although it gave the baffle some rigidity so that it wouldn't be too resonant. And you brought up a slanted cab, like a cab that's got one piece that has two speakers that's straight and another piece that has two speakers that's angled. And what's interesting about that, besides the frequency characteristics and the dispersion that happens because of that, what happens with those two pieces is they're joined in the middle by this rigid structure that keeps them from coming apart. And that's the stiffener that changes the whole mid-range characteristic of the front of the amp. It doesn't resonate like a straight cabinet. Everybody says, well, the straight cabinets have more fullness. They do. But the slanted cabinet has a different mid-range character, not because the speakers are angled, but because it's got this big reinforced joint across the middle of the right in the middle of the cab. That's what the V-brace does. It out at the ends of the baffle where it's connected to the cab, there's not going to be much resonance. In the middle, there's going to be a lot. So the brace starts out really thin on the ends and gets thicker as it goes to the middle to compensate for the fact that
it's more resonant in the middle.
It's more resonant in the middle.
By the way, if you don't know what we were talking about, or have a look at this video, I'll put a link here somewhere where I compared both the cabinets, and that was very interesting. So check it out. Check it out.
I actually contacted the engineer at Fane.
Okay.
When you did that.
The video about the differences between the speakers or the...
Yeah.
Because that was, I mean, maybe I was a little unlucky with the, which one was it? The fat bottom? Because two of them were quite different from each other.
And I gave him the link to the video. I said, look at this and tell me what you think about that.
So this is one of those moments when you go back to your supplier and say, here's something to...
And he says, yeah, that shouldn't be that noticeable of a difference. And he's unless I have the speaker, I won't know why.
But then again,
But see, that would be the kind of thing that if it was happening here, that speaker would come out and get in a box. It would go back to them in England, and they would come back to me and go,
but I think,
you know what we found? And then I might say, okay, do that all the time. You know, I mean, those are the kind of thing you're talking about. What is your approach? My approach is if you find something exciting, then you just pursue it until you can make it a repeatable thing.
I promised a very nerdy and long guitar gear discussion. I think we have delivered.
I think so.
Right. Once again, thank you very much.
You.
As usual,
Great
a pleasure. I'll be back next year. In the meantime, I hope to check out this lovely little box, and I also have to check out your amp switch. You'll see it on the channel. I actually have one of those. I just haven't found the time. It has a very, very unique feature, like an impedance switch. You'll see it.
And don't worry, if there's a hell down below, we will all go there.
See you in hell, motherfuckers. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.